The billionaire CEO Ethan Ward had everything: money, fame, power. But on the night of his first wedding anniversary, what he did left everyone speechless. Guests stood frozen in his glass mansion overlooking New York City, unsure whether to clap or cry. His wife, Ava, the quiet woman in the wheelchair he had once been judged for marrying, looked up with trembling eyes as Ethan walked toward her holding something no one expected. The whispers turned into gasps. Even his closest friend couldn't believe what he was about to do. Something inside that moment changed every idea of love, guilt, and kindness forever. But no one could guess the truth behind his emotional act until it was far too late. Ethan Ward was known across America as the young billionaire CEO who turned a small tech startup into a global empire. His face filled magazine covers. His speeches about innovation and leadership inspired millions. But behind every bright headline, Ethan lived in silence. His penthouse in Manhattan overlooked the skyline, yet the rooms felt empty. No laughter, no warmth, only the sound of a ticking clock and his thoughts echoing through glass walls. Every morning, his assistant left his schedule on the marble counter. Meetings, board calls, investor luncheons, the same routine. The world saw power. Ethan only felt exhaustion. The wealth he'd once dreamed of now felt like a cage, built from money, locked by loneliness. Then came Ava Brooks. She was nothing like the women who moved in his world. No diamonds, no designer dresses. Ava lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn, its walls covered with canvases splashed with color. Her wheelchair stood near the window, sunlight falling on the paint-stained floor. Once she had been an art teacher who filled classrooms with laughter and hope. Then a stormy night on the highway changed everything. A crash, a spine injury, weeks in the hospital. Months of learning to move again. Ava refused pity. Instead, she found strength in color, painting stories of healing and love that made people stop and feel. One of those paintings, a mural of resilience, was displayed at a charity event Ethan sponsored for rehabilitation programs. He hadn't planned to attend, but that night his board insisted. "It'll look good for the brand," they said. When he walked into that hall, he noticed her instantly, not because she was in a wheelchair, but because of how she looked at the world, as if nothing could take her spirit away. A reporter asked her, "Do you ever wish life had been fairer to you?" Ava smiled softly. "Maybe life was never unfair. Maybe it was just preparing me to see beauty where others see loss." The crowd went silent. Ethan felt something stir inside him. For the first time in years, he didn't think about stock prices or shareholder meetings. He thought about courage. Days later, he visited the community center again. Ava was there, helping children paint with adaptive tools she had designed herself. She didn't ask about his company or his money. She asked why he looked tired. No one had asked him that before. He found himself returning again and again. Small conversations turned into long evenings. She showed him how to find peace in stillness. He showed her how technology could restore independence. Ethan started funding her designs quietly, without telling the press. It wasn't charity, it was admiration. But Nora Blake, his longtime housekeeper, noticed the change. "You smile again, Mr. Ward," she said one morning, while placing fresh flowers on the table. He looked at her, almost startled. "Do I?" "You do," she replied. "And it's not because of money." Yet not everyone shared Nora's warmth. Mason Cole, Ethan's COO and trusted partner, didn't approve. He saw Ava as a threat, not to Ethan's heart, but to the company's image. "You're playing with fire," he warned. "The board won't like it. A disabled artist as the face of your foundation? Investors might think you've lost focus." Ethan ignored him. But Mason didn't stop watching. As weeks passed, love quietly grew between Ethan and Ava. She taught him that strength wasn't loud. It was silent, patient, and kind. When he proposed, it wasn't on a red carpet or under a chandelier. It was on the pier at Hudson River, with her painting brush still in hand. She said yes through tears, and the world soon learned that the billionaire CEO had married a woman who couldn't walk, but who had taught him how to live. For a while, life seemed perfect, but one evening, as Ava was arranging her paints in the penthouse studio, She found a sealed envelope tucked inside one of Ethan's old briefcases. The paper looked aged, the seal broken and resealed. Her hand froze. Inside was a photo, blurry, rain-soaked and painfully familiar. A car wreck, headlights in the dark, and on the corner of the image, Ethan's license plate number. Her heartbeat thundered. The same highway, the same night as her accident. She whispered his name in disbelief. Downstairs, Ethan stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights, unaware that the woman who had restored his soul had just uncovered the secret that could destroy everything. The next morning, Ava acted normal, at least she tried to, but the image in that envelope kept flashing in her mind. The broken guardrail, the twisted car lights, the rain, and that license plate, Ethan's. She watched him sip his coffee, calm as always, reading the morning reports. His tone was gentle, his eyes kind, yet something in her heart trembled. She didn't ask about the photo, not yet. She needed to understand why it existed before she shattered the peace they had built. That evening, they attended a private charity gala. The hall glittered with chandeliers and elegance. Guests in expensive suits whispered as Ava rolled in beside Ethan, wearing a deep blue gown that shimmered softly under the lights. Every move they made was judged, every smile measured. One journalist leaned toward another and whispered, "She must have married him for the money." Ava heard it. Ethan did too. But instead of reacting, she took his hand and smiled. "Let them think what they want," she said softly. Halfway through the event, a sudden gust of wind from an open terrace sent one of the large art sculptures wobbling toward the crowd. The room erupted in panic. Waiters froze. Guests screamed. Ethan rushed forward, but before he could reach it, Ava spun her wheelchair, locked the wheels, and pushed her chair against the sculpture's base to stop it from falling. People gasped as the heavy metal piece steadied just inches from a child. Silence followed. Everyone froze. Ethan knelt beside her, his expression a mix of shock and awe. "You could have been hurt," he whispered. She smiled faintly. So could they. For a moment the gossip stopped. The billionaire and his wife weren't a scandal anymore. They were a story of courage. Applause filled the room, emotional and spontaneous. But amid the cheers, Mason Cole stood at the back, arms crossed, expression cold. Later that night, Mason entered Ethan's office. "You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment," he warned. "People are talking. She's turning you into a charity headline." Ethan's tone hardened. "You call compassion a weakness? I call it bad business," Mason replied. "And I know you don't want anyone digging into old car records or accident reports, because if they do..." Ethan's glare cut him off. "Careful, Mason," Mason smirked. "I'm only protecting what you built. But secrets don't stay buried forever." He walked out, leaving a chill behind. Days passed, and Ava couldn't hold it in anymore. She waited until they were alone in the penthouse garden, under the soft glow of evening lights. "Ethan," she said quietly, "where were you the night of the storm, the night of my accident?" Ethan froze. His expression changed, subtle, but enough for her to see it. "Why are you asking that?" "I found something," she whispered. "A photo, your car, on the same road." He closed his eyes. "Ava, listen to me. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," she pressed, voice trembling. He turned away, gripping the railing. "I was there, but I didn't hit anyone. I saw the crash ahead. I called for help, but the line failed. I waited for the police, and I've lived with that night ever since." Her breath caught. "Oh, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to look at me and see that night." Tears welled in her eyes. "You should have trusted me." She wheeled past him, her silence louder than any words. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, staring at the envelope now missing from his drawer. He knew Mason must have planted it there, someone who had access, someone who wanted to break them apart. But what Ethan didn't know was that Mason had already gone further. Across the city, Mason met with a journalist at a quiet cafe. He placed a flash drive on the table. "Here's your next headline," he said. "Billionaire CEO hides connection to tragic highway accident." The journalist raised an eyebrow. "You sure it's true?" Mason smiled coldly. "By the time anyone checks, the story will already ruin him." and as the first raindrops began to fall outside, Ava looked out from her window, her heart heavy with doubt and pain, unaware that the storm from her past was about to return, stronger than ever. The story about Ethan and the hidden highway connection broke just 2 weeks later. It spread through headlines like wildfire. Billionaire CEO's secret past. Was his wife's tragedy no accident? Within hours, the company's shares began to drop. Investors demanded explanations. Mason, pretending concern, stepped forward to protect the brand. He assured the board that he'd handle it while quietly feeding more gossip to the media. Inside the penthouse, silence ruled. Ava sat by the window, the article open on her tablet. Every word felt like a dagger. She didn't know what to believe anymore, the man she loved, or the evidence now shouting from every headline. Ethan entered quietly, his voice low. "I know what they're saying. It's a lie." Her eyes stayed fixed on the skyline. "Then prove it," he took a breath. "I've already called my lawyers. I'll face the press myself." She turned to him, tears glinting. "You don't need to prove it to them, Ethan. You need to prove it to me." That sentence cut deeper than any headline. Over the next few days, Ethan's world crumbled piece by piece. Sponsors pulled out of charity programs. Friends stopped returning calls. The same people who had toasted his success now whispered behind his back. But the hardest part wasn't the money or reputation. It was Ava's silence. At night, she painted to keep her heart from breaking. Her strokes were no longer bright and hopeful. They were heavy, torn, full of grey. Nora, ever the quiet witness, tried to help. "Don't lose faith, dear," she said softly. "The truth always rises, even through mud." But truth wasn't rising fast enough. One evening, Ethan came home early from a board meeting that ended in chaos. Mason had suggested he step down for the company's stability. Ethan refused. He knew Mason was behind the leak, but he had no proof, until Nora walked in holding a small black flash drive. "I found this in the waste bin outside Mr. Cole's office," she said. "I thought you should see it." Ethan plugged it into his laptop and froze. Inside were recorded voice notes, Mason talking to a journalist, mentioning Ethan's car, the accident, and timing the story to make him resign. His hands clenched into fists. For the first time, the composed CEO looked truly broken. "He used Ava's pain for his own gain," he whispered. That night, he drove alone to the edge of the Hudson, where the city lights shimmered over dark water. The same road that once haunted him now pulled him back to the beginning. He remembered that night. The rain, the chaos, the truck overturned, the woman trapped in the car. He had tried to help, but emergency crews pushed him back. He waited in the rain until the ambulance left. He didn't know it had been Ava. Not until years later. He pulled out his phone and called Mason. "Meet me tomorrow," he said. "No lawyers, no board. Just us." The next day, Ethan faced the boardroom alone. Mason arrived confident, carrying documents. "I'll resign," Ethan said calmly, "if you'll make one announcement first." Mason frowned. "And what's that?" "That the truth matters more than your ambition." Before Mason could react, Nora entered with a reporter Ethan had personally called. "You wanted a story," Ethan said coldly. "Here it is, the truth." He handed her the flash drive. "Play it." Mason went pale. "You wouldn't." Ethan's tone hardened. "I already did. By evening, every outlet was reporting a new headline. CEO betrayed by partner who orchestrated false scandal. Mason's career was finished. But while Ethan cleared his name publicly, his heart remained in pieces. Ava had left the penthouse without a word that morning, leaving only one note. "I believe in your truth, but I need to find my own." Days turned into weeks. Ethan threw himself into rebuilding what was lost, not realizing that Ava had been quietly working on something too, a secret project with a hospital foundation. Something she refused to speak about until she was ready. Then, on the eve of their anniversary, Nora handed Ethan a sealed envelope. "Ava asked me to give you this tonight," she said softly. Inside was a single invitation card. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., the place where it all began." Ethan's heart pounded. That could only mean one thing. The old community arts center in Brooklyn, where he had first met her. He didn't know what awaited him there, forgiveness or goodbye. But one thing was certain: whatever happened next would change his life forever. The evening air over Brooklyn was heavy with mist when Ethan Ward arrived at the Community Arts Center, the place where everything had begun. The same mural still covered the brick wall, faded now but full of life. Strings of small lights flickered above the courtyard, casting a soft golden hue over the tables. He stood there for a long moment, hands trembling slightly. Inside, guests whispered in surprise. The once isolated billionaire had returned, not for business, but for something deeper. On the small stage sat Ava, wearing a white dress that flowed over her chair like water. She looked fragile yet strong, her eyes filled with a quiet storm. As Ethan approached, every sound seemed to fade. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, some curious, some judgmental. When he reached her, Ava didn't smile. She simply looked up at him and said softly, "You came." "I'd come anywhere if it meant finding you," he replied. She nodded, her tone steady. "I wanted you to see what I've been building." She gestured to a large covered frame behind her. "This is our story, Ethan, but not the one people read in the papers. The real one." He hesitated. "Ava, before you show me, there's something I have to say." The crowd quieted. Even the air felt tense. Ethan stepped closer, voice shaking with emotion. "I've spent my life chasing success, trying to control everything, every risk, every rumor, every mistake. But that night on the highway, I couldn't control it. I tried to help. I stayed until the police came. I didn't know it was you. And when I found out years later, I carried that guilt like a chain." Ava's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Ethan continued, his voice raw. "When I met you, I thought maybe life was giving me a second chance, to be better, to do right by someone. But I failed again when I didn't tell you the truth." A murmur spread through the crowd. He turned to them, no longer the calm CEO, but a man stripped of every layer of pride. "You want a story? Here it is. I wasn't her savior. She was mine." A silence fell so deep it was almost sacred. Then Ava wheeled toward the covered frame. "You said once that technology could restore independence. I wanted to show you what true independence looks like." She pulled the cloth away. The crowd gasped. It wasn't a painting. It was a large digital blueprint, a design for an adaptive art studio, built for people with disabilities to paint, sculpt, and create freely. "It's funded by the sale of my artwork," Ava explained. "But I named it after your mother, because she believed in kindness above everything." Ethan's eyes widened. "You did this," she nodded, "because you showed me that love doesn't need to stand, it just needs to stay." Tears welled in his eyes. "Ava, I don't deserve this," she smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But you deserve a chance to become the man you were meant to be." Before he could respond, a voice cut through the crowd, sharp and bitter. "Well, isn't this touching?" Everyone turned. It was Mason Cole, disheveled and furious. He held a folder of documents in his hand. "You think this little redemption show changes anything? You ruined my career, Ethan. You turned me into the villain." Ethan stepped in front of Ava. "You did that yourself." Mason's voice rose. "You're no hero. I'll show them what you really are." He opened the folder, scattering papers into the air. Copies of old police reports, accident files, and photos from that stormy night. Gasps rippled through the guests as the truth spilled across the floor. Ethan's chest tightened. "Mason, stop this." "Why?" Mason sneered. "So you can play saint while hiding your sins?" Ava's face went pale. The tension in the air thickened until someone shouted, "Is it true? Was he involved?" Ethan looked around at the fearful, confused faces, then at Ava, her expression unreadable. "Yes," he said quietly. "I was there. And I'm not running from it anymore." The crowd buzzed in shock, but before anyone could respond, Mason threw one last paper at Ethan. "Then tell them what else you're hiding. Tell them what you planned for tonight." Ethan's eyes darkened. "What are you talking about?" Mason smirked. "You'll find out soon enough." And with that he turned and walked out into the mist, leaving behind chaos, whispers, and a stunned silence. Ava looked at Ethan, fear flickering in her eyes. What did he mean? Ethan took a step back, confused and alarmed. I don't know. But whatever it is, he's not done. The lights flickered once, then twice. The crowd stirred nervously. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, just like the night of the accident. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt the same sinking dread in his chest. Something terrible was about to happen again. Lightning cracked across the sky as the power flickered again inside the art center. Murmurs filled the room, uneasy, anxious. Ethan scanned the guests, his heartbeat thundering. Mason's final words, "You'll find out soon enough," echoed in his head like a warning. Ava turned to him. "Ethan, what's happening?" He gripped her hand. "Stay close to Nora, don't move." Then suddenly an alarm blared. Red lights flashed over the walls. Nora hurried toward the hallway and shouted, "The building system just triggered a gas leak alert." Panic spread instantly. Guests began rushing toward the exits, fear flooding the air. Ethan sprinted toward the maintenance room. The metallic scent hit him the moment he opened the door. The main valve had been deliberately tampered with. Wires cut, a small device attached. He recognized it immediately. A timer. "Mason," he muttered. His hands shook as he tried to disable it. He'd worked with complex systems his whole career, but this one was crude and unpredictable. One wrong move and everything could ignite. Nora appeared at the door, face pale. Everyone's outside, but Ava's still in there. The ramp's jammed. His stomach dropped. "What?" "She's stuck near the stage. Something's blocking the exit." Without hesitation, Ethan bolted back into the smoke-filled hall. The air was thick now, heavy with the smell of gas. He could barely see through the haze. "Ava," he called out. "Where are you?" Her voice came faintly through the mist. "Ethan!" "The door's stuck. I can't move it." He rushed toward her voice, the glow of her wheelchair reflecting faintly in the light. Wooden beams had fallen from the ceiling decorations, blocking the ramp. He tried to lift them, but the wood was too heavy. She looked at him, terrified. "Go, Ethan! Please just go!" "Not a chance," he said, breathless. "I'm not leaving you." He braced his shoulder against the beam and pushed with all his strength. His muscles screamed, but it barely moved. Ava pressed her hands to his arm. "You can't save me like this." "Yes, I can," he said fiercely. "I won't let you become another regret." And then, as if the world heard his plea, a loud crack echoed. Part of the ceiling gave way near them. Ethan pulled Ava back just in time as fragments crashed onto the floor. Flames flickered near the edges of the stage. He looked at her, gasping. "We have to move, now!" Nora appeared again, coughing through the smoke, holding a small fire extinguisher.
"Over here!"
"There's a side exit." Together, they pushed Ava's chair toward the doorway, the air growing hotter by the second. Just as they reached the threshold, a blast of light burst behind them. The gas had ignited. The ground shook violently, and a wave of heat rushed over them. They stumbled out onto the street as firefighters arrived, alarms wailing in the distance. Ethan dropped to his knees beside Ava, coughing hard, covered in soot. She was trembling but alive. Paramedics rushed forward, but she held onto Ethan's arm. "You saved me," she whispered weakly. He looked at her, tears in his eyes. "No," he said softly. "You saved me, long before tonight." Fire crews moved fast, containing the flames before they reached the main structure. But amid the chaos, a voice shouted, "There's someone inside!" Ethan's head snapped up. "Who?" The firefighter's tone was grim. "We think it's the man who caused this. He didn't make it out." Ava's eyes widened. "Mason?" Ethan didn't answer. He stood in stunned silence, the truth sinking in. Mason hadn't left the building. His rage, his bitterness. It had consumed him in the very place built on forgiveness. Rain began to fall, hissing against the smoldering remains of the art center. Later, as the chaos subsided, a firefighter approached Ethan and handed him a scorched envelope found near the stage. It was addressed to Ava and Ethan. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside was Mason's final letter, short, hurried, written in guilt. "I only wanted to destroy your name. I never meant to hurt anyone. But when I saw what you built here, I realized too late that I'd already lost everything that mattered. I'm sorry." Ava's tears mixed with the rain. "He was angry, but he wasn't evil." she said softly. Ethan nodded. Anger eats the ones who hold it. He looked back at the wrecked building, the place where love, guilt, and redemption had collided in one night. Fire crews began clearing the debris. Amid the ashes, something unexpected glimmered. A charred but intact piece of Ava's mural, the one painted on their first meeting. It showed two figures standing together in a storm, holding a single umbrella. Ethan picked it up carefully, holding it close to his chest. "We'll rebuild this," he whispered. But as the paramedics guided Ava into the ambulance, one of the firefighters approached Ethan quietly. "Sir," he said, "you should see this." He led Ethan to the back alley, where a second envelope lay near a burned-out car, this one marked to Ethan Ward. Open alone. Ethan stared at it, drenched in rain. Inside, only one line was written in Mason's handwriting. "The accident wasn't what you think." Ethan's pulse quickened. He looked toward the burning ruins, dread spreading through him. If Mason was telling the truth, then the night that changed both his and Ava's lives wasn't just a tragedy. It was part of something far darker waiting to be uncovered. Weeks passed since the fire. The city moved on, headlines shifted, but for Ethan Ward and Ava Brooks, the scars, both seen and unseen, remained. The art center had been reduced to ashes, yet something new was beginning to rise from its ruins. Ethan resigned from his position as CEO, handing over the company to a capable team while he focused on something greater, the Brooks Ward Foundation, an initiative dedicated to rebuilding the art center and funding programs for disabled artists across America. His face still appeared in the news, but now it wasn't for business achievements, it was for kindness. Ava, still healing from the night of the fire, spent her days sketching new designs for the center, using colors brighter than before. Her art now spoke of forgiveness, courage, and rebirth. Every brushstroke was a message, proof that even pain could be transformed into beauty. But one question still haunted them both. What did Mason mean in his final note? "The accident wasn't what you think." One rainy afternoon, Nora walked into Ethan's study with a small brown envelope that had arrived by mail. "You might want to sit down for this," she said softly. Inside was an official report from the State Traffic Department. Attached was a note from an anonymous sender. Ethan unfolded the papers and froze. His eyes moved quickly over the lines until he reached the part that made his breath catch. The report confirmed that Mason's car, not Ethan's, had been the one closest to the impact point on the night of the crash years ago. Mason had fled the scene before the police arrived, panicked and afraid his reckless speeding would ruin his career. Ethan's car, which had broken down near the crash, had only been captured later when he tried to help the victims. The realization hit like a wave. Mason had carried the guilt for years, watching Ethan rise in success while his own conscience decayed. And when fate reunited Ethan with Ava, Mason's jealousy turned to hatred, because deep down he knew he was the one who'd caused her suffering. Ethan sat in silence, tears forming. "He tried to destroy me to escape his guilt," he whispered. "And all along I blamed myself." Ava reached out, touching his hand gently. "Guilt is a heavy chain," she said softly, "but you carried it with grace. Now it's time to let it go." The following month, on the exact date of their anniversary, the new Ava Brooks Art Center opened its doors. The crowd wasn't filled with billionaires or reporters this time. It was filled with children in wheelchairs, young artists with dreams, and families who believed in second chances. Ethan stood beside Ava as the mayor handed her the scissors for the ribbon. Her smile was radiant. "This place," she said, addressing the small crowd, "is built not on wealth, but on kindness, the only power that truly changes lives." As the ribbon fell, applause broke out. Ethan looked at her, his eyes wet. "You were right, Ava. Love doesn't need to stand. It just needs to stay." Later that evening, the two of them sat quietly in the courtyard, where a new mural had been painted on the wall. It depicted a man and a woman facing a storm together, holding one umbrella. the same design that had survived the fire. Ava handed Ethan a small wrapped box. "Open it," she said. Inside was a silver bracelet engraved with simple words. "You stayed." He smiled, voice trembling. "I don't deserve this." She shook her head. "No, Ethan, you earned it." As the evening sky turned golden, Nora joined them carrying a tray of tea. She smiled warmly. "Your mother would be proud, Ethan. You turned your pain into purpose." Ethan looked out over the garden, where children were laughing and painting. For the first time in years, the air felt peaceful. "Maybe this was the real test," he said quietly. "Not building an empire, but building a life worth remembering." Ava leaned her head against his shoulder. "You already have." In the distance, church bells chimed, soft and hopeful. The mural shimmered in the last light of day, reflecting every color of their journey: grief, guilt, forgiveness, love. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Ethan whispered the words that had stayed in his heart since that first day they met. "Thank you for teaching me what it means to truly live." Ava smiled through her tears. "And thank you," she whispered back, "for showing the world what it means to truly love." The story that began with the storm ended with kindness, not the kind bought with money, but the kind born from forgiveness. And as the art center's lights glowed against the night, it stood as a symbol that even from the deepest pain, something beautiful and life-changing can rise again. That night, their love didn't make headlines. It made history in the hearts of everyone who believed that compassion, not power, is what makes us truly human.